The morning my daughter showed up at my door with 2 suitcases and a casserole dish, I should have known something was wrong. But I didn't. I just stood there in my robe, 63 years old, still half asleep, and thought, how sweet. She came to check on me. My husband, Robert, had passed 7 months earlier. Pancreatic cancer. 41 years we were married. And then one Tuesday in October, he was just gone. The house didn't feel like a house anymore. It felt like a waiting room. So when my daughter Vanessa called and said, "Mama, I've been thinking, Victor and I want to come stay with you for a little while, just until you get back on your feet," I said yes before she even finished the sentence. I want you to understand who I was before any of this happened. I was a retired postal supervisor from Columbus, Ohio. I owned my home outright. Robert and I had paid it off 12 years before he died. I had a pension. I had a savings account with a number in it that I worked 40 years to build. I had a car I drove myself. I paid my own bills, filed my own taxes, managed my own life. I was not a woman who needed to be managed. But grief does something to you. It softens the edges of your judgment. You start to mistake loneliness for helplessness, and sometimes, if the wrong person is watching, they mistake it too. Or, worse, they use it. Vanessa and her husband Victor moved into the guest room the 2nd week of May. By the end of June, I couldn't find my own mail. It started small. That's what I want people to understand. It always starts small. Victor began offering to run to the post office for me. Then he started bringing in the mail himself and leaving it on the kitchen counter in a neat little pile that somehow never seemed to include anything from my bank or my financial advisor. When I asked about it, Vanessa would say, "Oh, Mama, Victor handles all of that. He doesn't want you stressed out." And I would think, isn't that thoughtful? Then my prescription started coming late. I take medication for blood pressure and for my thyroid, have for years, no problems, but suddenly my refills were getting confused. Victor offered to manage my medication schedule. He set up one of those weekly pill organizers on my bathroom counter. Very organized, very thorough. And I thought, isn't that helpful? Then I started getting dizzy. Not dizzy like you feel when you stand up too fast. Dizzy like the room was tilting on an axis I couldn't find. I'd sit at the kitchen table in the morning and grip the edge of it and wait for the world to settle. I mentioned it to Vanessa and she said I was probably just dehydrated. She brought me a glass of water and patted my hand, and that was that. I want to tell you the exact moment I first felt it. That low, cold feeling in the center of your chest that tells you something is wrong even when your brain is still arguing. It was a Thursday. I woke up at 2 a.m. to use the bathroom, and on my way back to bed, I stopped in the hallway because I could hear them. Vanessa and Victor in the kitchen speaking in low voices the way people do when they think everyone else is asleep. I didn't hear everything, just pieces. The paperwork needs to be filed before the end of the month. She won't fight it if we present it the right way. Just keep things calm until then. I stood in that dark hallway in my nightgown and I told myself I'd misheard. I told myself it was about something else. Their finances, maybe, or a work situation. I went back to bed and I lay there staring at the ceiling and I told myself a lot of things that I almost believed. Almost. A week later, I had a routine appointment with my doctor. His name is Dr. Colin Okonkwo, and he has been my primary care physician for 11 years. I trust that man the way you trust someone who has seen you at your worst and never made you feel small for it. Vanessa drove me to the appointment and came inside with me, which she hadn't done before. She sat in the chair beside me in the exam room, and when Dr. Okonkwo asked how I was feeling, she answered first. "She's been a little confused lately," Vanessa said, forgetting things. "Getting turned around sometimes when she's driving." I looked at her. "I haven't gotten turned around driving." "Mama, remember when you went to get groceries and ended up at the pharmacy?" "I meant to go to the pharmacy. I needed to pick up." "She means well," Vanessa said to Dr. Okonkwo in a voice that was kind and patient and made me feel like a child. "She just doesn't always remember things the way they happened." Dr. Okonkwo listened. He nodded. He examined me the way he always does, thorough and unhurried. But then he did something that had never happened in 11 years of appointments. He asked Vanessa to wait in the lobby. "I'd like to do a brief cognitive assessment," he said. Standard for patients in her age group. It goes better one-on-one. Vanessa hesitated just for a second, but I saw it. Of course, she said, and she smiled at me and left. The minute the door closed, Doctor smiled at me and left. Okonkwo turned to me and his whole face changed. Not dramatically, he's too professional for that, but his eyes got serious in a way that made my stomach drop. How are you really feeling? He asked. I told him about the dizziness, the late prescriptions, the feeling that things were being managed around me rather than for me. I told him about the conversation I'd half heard in the kitchen. I told him about the mail. He listened to every word without interrupting. Then he said, I have to be careful about what I say to you right now, because your daughter is going to ask me about this visit, but I want you to hear me clearly. He picked up his prescription pad. Not to write a prescription. He wrote something on a small piece of paper, folded it once, and pressed it into my hand. Read that when you're alone, not in the car on the way home, when you are completely alone. I closed my fingers around that paper. Vanessa was cheerful on the drive home. She talked about a recipe she wanted to try and asked if I needed anything from the store. I said no and looked out the window and kept my hand in my pocket, fingers wrapped around that folded square. I waited until after dinner. Victor had gone out to get something from their car and Vanessa was in the shower. I sat on the edge of my bed, the bed I'd shared with Robert for 37 years, and I unfolded that paper. Dr. Okonkwo had written 4 things. The first was the name of an elder law attorney in Columbus. The second was the name of an organization, the Ohio Elder Abuse Hotline. The third was a single sentence, your medications have been altered. Dosages inconsistent with what I prescribed. And the fourth was a question he must have known I needed someone to finally ask me. Do you feel safe? I sat with that paper for a long time. I've been asked since then how I felt in that moment. And the honest answer is that I felt 2 things at the same time. The first was grief, the kind that hits you fresh even when you thought you'd already done your grieving. Because I wasn't just losing the version of my daughter I thought I knew. I was realizing I might have never fully known her. The second thing I felt was clarity. Sharp and cold and absolute. The kind of clarity that comes when the fog lifts all at once and you realize you've been standing on the edge of something dangerous without knowing it. I did not cry. I folded the paper and put it inside my Bible, between the pages of Psalms where I keep things I need to come back to. I needed to talk to someone I trusted. The person I thought of immediately was my oldest friend, a woman named Cecily, who I'd known since we were both young mothers in the same church choir 35 years ago. Cecily had been a paralegal for most of her career before she retired. She was precise and calm, and she did not panic, which was exactly what I needed. I waited until Vanessa and Victor were both out of the house the next afternoon. I called Cecily from my bedroom with the door shut and I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment when I finished. Then she said, Lorene, I need you to listen to me very carefully because what I'm about to tell you is going to feel like a lot, but you can do every single one of these things. Cecily told me to call my bank first thing the following morning and add a verbal password to my account. She told me to request a copy of all transactions from the past 6 months. She told me to call my financial advisor and put a freeze on any changes to my accounts. She told me to contact the elder law attorney Dr. Okonkwo had recommended. And she said, and this was the part that landed hardest, honey, you need to understand that what you're describing has a name. It's called financial elder abuse, and it is a crime. That night, I lay awake listening to the sounds of my own house. Victor's footsteps in the kitchen, the television on low, the furnace clicking the way it always does in May when the nights still get cool. My house. The house Robert and I had chosen together, had raised our children in, had grown old and together, and I thought about the fact that somewhere in the paperwork that Vanessa and Victor were keeping from me, there were documents with my name on them that I hadn't signed, or documents with my signature that I didn't remember giving. I also thought about Robert, about what he would say if he were here. Robert was a quiet man, but he was not a soft one. He would have put a stop to this the first week. He would have sat our daughter down and looked her in the eye and said, "What are you doing, Vanessa?" in that low voice of his that meant he already knew the answer and wanted to give her one chance to tell the truth. Robert wasn't here, so I would have to do it myself. 3 days later, while Vanessa was at a hair appointment and Victor had gone with her, I drove myself to the bank. I want to tell you that it felt empowering driving myself to the bank. It didn't, at first. I was shaking a little when I pulled into the parking lot. I sat in the car for a few minutes, and I said out loud to nobody, or maybe to Robert, "All right, let's go." The branch manager, a young woman named, I'll remember this, Thompson, was the one who sat down with me. I told her I had concerns about recent activity on my account. She pulled up my records, and her expression stayed professional, but I saw something shift in her eyes when she looked at the screen. There had been 3 transfers in the past 2 months, each one under $10,000. I learned later this is called structuring, a method people use specifically to avoid triggering automatic bank alerts. Together they totaled just over $26,000. The transfers had gone to an account I did not recognize. I asked Tamsin to freeze any further transfers pending my written authorization. I asked for a printed record of the past 6 months of transactions. I added a verbal security password to my account, and I asked her, quietly, if there was someone at the bank I should speak to about suspected elder financial abuse. She said yes. She picked up the phone right then. I met with the attorney, a man named Mr. Callahan, 2 days later. I'd called him from a gas station parking lot 3 blocks from my house, because by that point I'd found a small device behind the kitchen phone that Victor had told me was a Wi-Fi booster. Mr. Callahan told me it was almost certainly not a Wi-Fi booster. Mr. Callahan was methodical. He reviewed the bank statements I brought him. He noted that the transfers appeared to have been initiated online, from a device that was not mine. He explained that because Robert had not left a will that named me a sole executor, Vanessa had apparently been attempting to argue that I was mentally incapacitated and therefore required a legal guardian. The paperwork I'd heard them discussing that night in the kitchen was a petition for guardianship over my person and my estate. If it had gone through, I would have had no legal control over my own money, my own medical decisions, or my own living situation. My own living situation. Callahan told me that we could file a response to the petition and that my own documentation, the bank records, Dr. Okonkwo's written statement, which he had agreed to provide, and my own testimony would make a strong case. He also told me I should contact the Columbus Police Department's Elder Abuse Unit, which I did, that same afternoon from Mr. Callahan's office. I drove home. I cooked dinner. I set the table the way I always do, with the placemats Robert's mother had given us as a wedding gift, and I sat down with my daughter and her husband, and I ate, and I said very little. I had learned, by then, to be still, to not show my hand. The following Monday morning, I asked Vanessa and Victor to sit down with me at the kitchen table. Victor started to reach for his phone, the way he always did when he wanted to look something up or record something. I put my hand on his arm and said, "Please don't." He put the phone down. I told them what I knew. Not everything, not the attorney, not the police, but the bank transfers, the altered medications, the guardianship petition. I told them I had spoken to my doctor and that I was not confused and I was not incapacitated and I was not capacitated and I was not going anywhere. Vanessa cried. She said I had misunderstood everything, that it was for my own good, that Victor had only wanted to protect me. I looked at my daughter, this woman I had nursed through chicken pox and taught to drive and danced with at her wedding, and I felt something I had never felt for her before. Not anger exactly, more like the sorrow of seeing someone clearly for the first time and wishing you didn't have to. Victor said nothing. He just looked at the table. I told them they needed to leave my home. I had already called the locksmith who was coming that afternoon. I had already spoken to my attorney. I told them calmly that any further contact would be handled through legal counsel. They left that afternoon. Vanessa took her casserole dish. What happened after is a longer story than I'll tell today, but I'll give you the shape of it. The bank recovered most of the transferred funds. The guardianship petition was denied. The district attorney's office reviewed the case and filed charges against Victor for financial elder abuse and unauthorized account access. Vanessa was not charged, but she was named in the civil action. Mr. Callahan was very thorough. I changed my locks. I updated my will and my medical power of attorney, and I gave copies to Cecily and to Dr. Okonkwo and to Mr. Callahan. I started going to a grief support group at my church, which Robert's passing had made me avoid, but which turned out to be exactly what I needed. I planted tomatoes in the backyard in June, which Robert and I always did together, and I planted enough for 2 people even though it's just me, because hope takes up space and I wanted to give it room. I want to say something to whoever is listening to this, because I know some of you are older, and some of you are alone, and some of you have people in your lives right now who are making you feel like you can't trust your own mind. You can trust your own mind. Grief is not dementia. Loneliness is not incapacity. And the people who love you will never need you to stop paying attention in order to feel that love. If something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. Your instincts were built over a lifetime of experience. Don't let anyone, not even someone who shares your blood, convince you to stop listening to them. Robert used to say that the most dangerous thing in the world is a soft target that doesn't know it's soft. I was soft for a little while, but I knew, and that knowing is what saved me. My name is Lorene. I am 63 years old. I own my home, I drive my own car, I manage my own life, and I am still here. I think about Thompson sometimes, that young bank teller who pulled up my account, saw something that didn't look right, and didn't look away. She didn't have to say a word to me beyond what was required. But she stayed, she made the call. She sat with me while I waited. And I think what she did that afternoon was one of the most decent things one human being can do for another. She told the truth when it would have been easier not to. That's what started the chain of events that saved me. Not any one dramatic moment, but a series of small, honest acts. Dr. Trezel. Okonkwo folding that paper and pressing it into my hand. Cecily walking me through every step on the phone. Mr. Callahan reviewing those bank statements line by line without once making me feel foolish for not having caught it sooner. Decency compounds, the same way damage does. The difference is in which one you choose to pass forward. Vanessa made her choices. I've had a long time now to sit with that, and I've stopped trying to find the one moment where everything went wrong with her. The truth is, I may never know. What I do know is that what she and Victor did had a logic to it. They counted on my grief, making me soft, my love making me blind, and my age making other people assume I was already half gone. Every one of those was a calculation. And calculations that treat a person like a variable instead of a human being tend to collapse under their own weight eventually, because they're built on a lie, and lies require constant maintenance. What I've learned, what I carried out of all of this, is that staying sharp is not a luxury when you get older. It is a responsibility you owe to yourself. I was not confused. I was grieving, which is different. But I let those 2 things blur for a little while, and that blur was the opening. The moment I stopped trusting my own instincts was the moment I became vulnerable, and the moment I started trusting them again was the moment everything began to turn around. I also learned that asking for help is not weakness. Calling Cecily, walking into that bank, sitting across from Mr. Callahan. Every one of those took something out of me that felt like pride at first. But pride and dignity are not the same thing. I kept my dignity through all of it. I kept it because I did not quit, and I did not let shame talk me into silence. There's something I want you to hold on to. Whoever you are, whatever version of this you might be living right now, the people who truly love you will never need you to stop paying attention. They will never need your confusion in order to feel needed. Real love doesn't ask you to make yourself smaller so that someone else can feel larger. Robert knew that. He lived it every day of our marriage, and though he wasn't there when I needed him most, what he'd taught me about my own worth, that stayed. It got me to Tamsin's desk, it got me to Cecily's phone, it got me all the way through. I planted those tomatoes last June and I ate them all summer long.